In April 2025, authorities in Nassau County, Florida, announced the arrest of 44-year-old Melissa Ganey English, who's accused of embezzling more than $500,000 while serving as the financial secretary of the Amelia Baptist Church between January of 2019 and October 2024. English fell under suspicion after two new church officials noticed some concerning monetary irregularities, including a suspiciously low availability of funds. While reviewing statements for a church credit card that had been issued to English, they discovered evidence that she had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on personal expenses. After serving in her position for 11 years, English was fired, and the church hired a specialist to review its records from 2019 forward. According to the findings, English embezzled $40,000 that year. She allegedly embezzled more than twice that amount the following year through fraudulent credit card charges, personal credit card payments, and unauthorized payroll payments to herself. Records indicate that English went on to commit more than $100,000 worth of fraud each year in 2021, 2022, and 2023, spending the ill-gotten funds on SeaWorld tickets, hotel stays, shoes, flight tickets, a helicopter ride over the Grand Canyon, cruise fare, concert tickets, Airbnb rentals, sporting events, and more. Her suspected embezzlement throughout the first 10 months of 2024 totaled more than $90,000. English was charged with one count of felony grand theft over $100,000 and is currently awaiting her arraignment hearing. Number 25. Ashley Zehnder. In October of 2014, students at Pasadena High School in Texas began trading an inappropriate photo of biology teacher and cheerleading coach Ashley Zehnder. The 24-year-old tried to get in front of the situation by telling school administrators that the students had gotten the photos from an old cell phone of hers, but investigators uncovered evidence that she'd been having a months-long affair with a male student who was a member of the cheerleading squad. Speaking with local station KHOU, Assistant District Attorney Nick Socias said that the student was able to describe the location and layout of Zehnder's apartment, as well as her bedroom. When confronted with the evidence, Zehnder reportedly admitted to both the illicit relationship and sending the unclothed photo of herself to the student via Snapchat. She resigned from her position and was charged with one felony count of having an improper relationship with a student. Following her arrest, Zehnder was freed on a $10,000 bond. She was reportedly in a long-term relationship at the time of the scandal, but updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the outcome of the case and Zehnder's personal life unclear. Number 24. Tanya Ramirez. In 2014, teacher and sports coach Tanya Ramirez was accused of having inappropriate relations with two students she taught at King High School in Corpus Christi, Texas. Her misconduct came to light after one of the teens surreptitiously recorded themselves being intimate with the then 31-year-old educator, then shared the video with his friends. The recording ultimately ended up on YouTube, at which point it would have been hard for Ramirez to deny the relationship. Ramirez was fired from her job, and in 2016 she pleaded guilty to a felony charge of having an improper relationship with a student as part of a plea deal. Under the terms of the agreement, she was sentenced to 7 years of probation, which was a generous break compared to the 20-year prison term she could have faced. She was also fined $4,000 in order to surrender her teaching license. Following her conviction, Ramirez filed a defamation lawsuit against the mother of one of her victims for calling her a predator during a media interview. She also sued one of the victims for inflicting emotional distress by disseminating the video he had secretly recorded of them being intimate. In her complaint, she argued that recording and sharing these types of videos is a felony under Texas law. Later that year, Ramirez went on Dr. Phil to argue her case, but both of the lawsuits were dismissed. She also challenged the statute that she was charged under, arguing that the student was of legal consent age and that her actions would not have constituted a crime if she wasn't a teacher. This lawsuit also appears to have been unsuccessful, with records stating that the trial court's original ruling was upheld by an appeals court. Number 23. Lang He. University of California student Yi Xiong experienced a living nightmare during a night of drinking at an off-campus apartment in the summer of 2012 when a man forced himself on her and assaulted her. A medical examination found biological fluids from the alleged attacker, Lang He, on Xiong's body. He denied the allegations, claiming that he believed the interaction was consensual and that they hadn't gone all the way. Her first 2 trials ended in hung juries. He decided to avoid a 3rd trial by pleading no contest to assault by means of force likely to produce great bodily injury in 2016, and was sentenced to a year in the Yolo County Jail, followed by 5 years of probation. Just minutes after the punishment was handed down, Xiong was served with a $4 million lawsuit. She and 3 of her siblings were accused of defamation for things they had said about her and his crimes on social media. Speaking to the Associated Press, Xiong described the lawsuit as a slap to the face and a way to continue harassing her and her family. According to Xiong's attorney, McGregor Scott, the lawsuit had a re-victimizing effect on the young woman after she had suffered the most horrible circumstances imaginable. Thankfully for Xiong, the judge tasked with overseeing the civil case dismissed the lawsuit in October of 2016. According to news reports, He's allegations against Xiong came amid a concerning trend of convicted predators suing their victims for bad-mouthing them, giving rise to fears that victims would become scared of reporting their attackers. But it seems as though the majority of these lawsuits were unsuccessful in court, showing that most judges are unwilling to support attackers' claims. Number 22. Lounging during a riot. As civil unrest overtook cities across the US following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, more than a dozen Chicago police officers were accused of shirking their duties and lounging around in the burglarized office of US Representative Bobby Rush. According to officials, the officer spent 4 to 5 hours in the office and even had the audacity to take naps, microwave popcorn, and brew coffee, while looters were destroying businesses just a stone's throw away. Rush's staffers discovered the footage and turned it over to city officials. Initial reports speculated that 13 cops had been hanging out with the officer, but 17 police officers, including at least 3 supervisors, were ultimately suspended for their conduct. The punishments ranged from 1 to 20 days, and the police union filed grievances challenging all of the suspensions, which it had the right to do. The video was met with widespread disgust, not only by the general public, but by public officials as well. Police Superintendent David Brown wondered out loud how the officers spent their shifts when there wasn't a riot occurring, while Rush himself criticized the seemingly lackadaisical attitudes of the officers, who seemed completely unconcerned with restoring order to the chaos that had overrun the city. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot shared her feelings after seeing the footage, stating, "We should all be disgusted and we should all feel hurt and betrayed." Number 21. Elizabeth Novac. In October 2024, police in Cape Coral, Florida, received a call from a loss prevention specialist at a local Target store where 24-year-old Elizabeth Novac was accused of using a young child to help her shoplift. Responding officers viewed a surveillance video which appeared to show Novac filling up a cart with unpaid merchandise and having the child push it out of the store by themselves. The items were collectively valued at more than $1,100 and included a $260 vacuum cleaner and a $700 barista machine. Police agreed that the woman in the video had committed crimes but were initially unable to identify her. In an arrest report, an officer noted their intentions to conduct a follow-up investigation in their attempts to figure out who she was. A few days later, officers received another call about a woman panhandling. They recognized her as the same person in the Target video and arrested her on 1 count of grand theft and 1 count of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. During questioning, Novac acknowledged that she was the person in the Target footage and that the child in the video was her son. When an investigator asked her why she had instructed her son to push the cart out of the store without her, she initially stated, "I needed a coffee maker." When the investigator repeated the question, she replied, "I'm so sorry, I don't know." Records show that Novac pleaded guilty to both counts in February of 2025. She was granted deferred adjudication, which means that she's being given a chance to avoid any permanent convictions in the case as long as she follows certain rules and fulfills specific obligations set forth by the court. Number 20. Denise Gunderson, aka Stephanie Burns. In a bizarre case that made news headlines in late 2015, a 50-year-old woman named Denise Gunderson was accused of crashing weddings across the US in order to steal from newlywed couples. According to authorities, Denise, also known as Stephanie Burns, snuck into the bridal party's rooms and stole their wallets and personal belongings while they were busy celebrating their nuptials with their guests. She also took wedding gifts. One victim, Michelle Tights, returned to her bridal suite to find her wallet missing. The thief almost immediately began using the stolen credit cards, accruing $1,400 in fraudulent charges before Tyatt could even cancel the accounts. Determined to hold the thief accountable, Tyatt posted surveillance footage of Gunderson on social media in hopes that someone would be able to help identify her. The post went viral, and Burns was connected to at least 4 additional wedding robberies throughout California. She was captured in Las Vegas in December of 2015 after she was caught trying to steal a churchgoer's wallet. Suspecting that Burns was giving them a fake name and birth date, officers arrested her for providing false information. After doing some more digging, they identified her as the so-called bridal bandit. Burns was extradited to San Diego County, where she was sentenced to 7 years in prison for her offenses in that area alone. At the time, she still had at least 11 outstanding felony charges in Riverside, but it's unclear what became of those cases. Number 19. Kelly Johanneson. In March of 2015, 36-year-old Kelly Johanneson of Citrus County, Florida, was accused of faking cancer in order to deceptively steal thousands of dollars from sympathetic donors. The fraud reportedly began in 2013 after Johanneson disappeared for a month. When she reappeared, she told friends and family that she had been away receiving treatment for stage 4 breast cancer. Supporters raised $4,400 from one crowdfunding campaign alone, and Johanneson benefited from other fundraisers. She also received hundreds of dollars in cash donations after asking for help paying for doctor's appointments. Johannesson's arrest came after a 6-month investigation which was launched the previous year after police received a complaint. While speaking with the woman's friends and family, detectives learned that none of them had accompanied Johanneson to any doctor's appointments, nor did they have any solid evidence that she was suffering from cancer. They had simply trusted that she was telling the truth, which is understandable, since most people would probably never lie about something like that, especially to their loved ones. Johanneson provided investigators with official-looking medical documents bearing doctors' names and the name of the center where she had supposedly received treatment. But when they tried validating the paperwork, they learned that the facility had never treated a patient by Johannesson's name. Employees at the facility were also unable to track Johanneson as a patient through her birthday or social security number. The center's staff also confirmed that the documents were fake, and Johanneson was charged with felony organized fraud. The case made many news headlines when the story first broke, but the story appears to have fallen quiet afterward, leaving the outcome unclear. Number 18. Brandon Simosa. During the fall of 2024, a Venezuelan migrant with suspected ties to Tren de Aragua was accused of robbing and exposing himself to an assistant prosecutor in Manhattan. According to police, 25-year-old Brandon Simosa confronted the 38-year-old victim inside her building on 44th Street at 2 o'clock in the morning. He stole the woman's purse, cell phone, and bank card and yelled at her until she told him her PIN numbers. The suspect then showed the victim his privates, did a lewd gesture for several seconds and fled the scene. Investigators tracked the stolen cell phone to a hotel in Midtown West that was operating as a migrant shelter, where they found Simosa in possession of more than $500 worth of stolen Adidas clothing. While being taken into custody, he bragged about how he was all over the news, saying, "I'm famous, and my friends told on me." Simosa was charged with multiple crimes, including criminal possession and robbery. Authorities believe he came to the United States in February 2023, and he arrived in New York City in June of 2024. In the 5 months leading up to his arrest for robbing the assistant district attorney, he was arrested 6 times for similar crimes. He showed no remorse during his initial court hearing for his latest arrest, when he was seen yawning, smirking, and rolling his eyes, as if he didn't have a care in the world. Simosa's behavior caught the attention of the judge, who commented that the defendant didn't seem to be taking the situation seriously. She detained him without bail, and in the meantime, immigration authorities moved to place a detainer on him, which would prevent him from being freed in the event that state authorities released him from their custody. Number 17. Tanya Fernandes Anderson. In December 2024, 46-year-old Boston City Councilwoman Tanya Fernandes Anderson was indicted on 5 federal counts of aiding and abetting wire fraud and 1 count of aiding and abetting theft of federal monies in connection with a kickback scheme. She was accused of operating a complex kickback scheme which involved hiring a family member who she denied being related to and giving that person a $13,000 raise in exchange for a $7,000 cash payment. Fernandes, Anderson's relative, was hired in December 2022. The money for the kickback was exchanged in a City Hall bathroom 6 months later, and some of the disgraced politician's colleagues felt that the fact that the money was handed over at City Hall made her crimes even more egregious. Prosecutors revealed that Fernandes Anderson was experiencing financial problems. At the time of her crimes, she was reportedly late on her rent and car note, had recently overdrawn on her bank account, and had recently been fined $5,000 for hiring other relatives to work for her. The Cape Verdean-born politician initially pleaded not guilty to the charges and was appointed a public defender after telling the judge that she could not afford an attorney despite her six-figure salary. In April 2025, Fernandes Anderson agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of theft. She agreed to resign from her position on the council and is currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for July 29th. Under the terms of the agreement, the government is recommending a 1-year federal prison sentence followed by 3 years of supervised release, as well as restitution in the amount of $13,000. Shortly before Fernandes Anderson officially entered her guilty plea, she was seen emptying furniture out of her office. It's unclear whether the furniture belonged to her, but she posted a $67 U-Haul charge to her campaign finance report the following day. Number 16. Joshua Lazore. While performing a welfare check at a Tupelo, Mississippi residence on April 29, 2025, police found the body of 62-year-old Sherry West Lazore stuffed into an outdoor garbage can. She had been brutally beaten to death with a shovel and stabbed in the head and neck. Also present at the scene was Sherry's son, 30-year-old Joshua Lazore, who reportedly confessed to killing his mother. Investigators also uncovered video evidence of the crime, and Joshua was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. It was later revealed during a bond hearing that Joshua had answered the door during the welfare check and had led police to his mother's body. The defendant tried waiving his right to an attorney, stating that he wanted to represent himself, and told the judge that he would like to get to the plea section, indicating that he was ready to take responsibility for his actions. But the judge prevented him from speaking any further and told him that a plea hearing would occur at a later date. Lazore was denied bond and remanded to the Lee County Jail. And this is not his first brush with law enforcement. Back in 2020, he was charged with felony destruction of public property and criminal mischief for damaging a computer, 2 TVs, and a touchscreen kiosk inside a lobby at the Lee County Sheriff's Office during the early morning hours. He was sentenced to 5 years of probation in that case after pleading guilty to the destruction of property charge. A week after Lazore's arrest for killing his mother, the case was bound over to a grand jury. In the meantime, he remains held without bond, despite his directness during his conversations with police and subsequent court hearing. His alleged motive for killing his mother has not been revealed to the public. Number 15. Qua'vion Cooper. High school football player Brandon Smith was last seen alive in Manchester County, Georgia on December 7th, 2023. He was reported missing 2 days later by his grandmother after she was unable to reach him by phone, and his body was found behind a local residence the following day. According to news reports, investigators immediately suspected foul play and requested assistance with the case from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Based on an autopsy and the findings of their investigation, authorities concluded that he had been fatally shot during an argument. Smith had been killed just days before his football team was scheduled to compete in a state championship in Atlanta. The team played in the event in his honor. In January of 2024, 19-year-old Adarius Jashwan Williams was arrested for Smith's murder. A second arrest came in May of 2025 when Smith's teammate Qua'vion Cooper was charged with murder as a party to the crime. According to local news outlet WSB, Cooper was a star on the football team and had participated in the game that was played in Smith's honor just days after he was killed. Authorities have not revealed the specific details about the argument that they believe led to the murder. The investigation is ongoing, and anyone with information is encouraged to contact the GBI. Number 14. Joshua Alexander Farmer. At around 5 p.m. on June 28, 2023, police in Fishers, Indiana, responded to a shooting at a local Speedway gas station. At the scene, emergency responders found the bullet-riddled body of 33-year-old Kayla Ann Farmer, who had been shot more than 15 times in broad daylight while sitting next to a gas pump in her red Chrysler minivan. Later identified as Kayla's ex-husband, 34-year-old Joshua Alexander Farmer. The suspect could be seen pulling into the gas station parking lot right after the victim. He then approached a window and opened fire, with witnesses later saying that they recalled hearing between 30 and 40 shots total. Kayla had been on her way home from work when she decided to stop for gas. She was unaware that Joshua had been following her around all day. The day after Kayla's murder, an officer found Joshua hiding behind a bush and arrested him without incident. Earlier that month, Joshua had been charged with 10 felonies for committing egregious acts of domestic violence against Kayla and their children. Kayla had a history of wearing makeup to cover facial injuries inflicted by her estranged husband, and the former couple's young son recalled one particularly disturbing occasion when Joshua had held a gun to Kayla's head and ordered her to choose between herself and the little boy. He also remembered another incident when his father had strangled Kayla right in front of him. 2 months after Kayla's murder, prosecutors announced their intention to seek the death penalty against Joshua, who they believed had killed his estranged wife to stop her from testifying against him in the domestic violence case. The accused killer managed to avoid the capital punishment by pleading guilty to first-degree murder and stalking. In exchange for his plea, the state dropped several other charges, including criminal recklessness and unlawful carrying of a handgun. In May of 2025, he was sentenced to 80 years behind bars, effectively amounting to a life term. Number 13. Bunnak Landon. On April 26, 2023, a man awoke at his Harahan, Louisiana home to the absences of his living girlfriend, 44-year-old Bunnak Landon, and his young daughter from a previous relationship, Bella Fontenelle. Immediately concerned for their well-being, he went to a local police station and reported them both missing. Less than an hour later, police paid a visit to the home of Fontenelle's biological mother, where they found the little girl's remains stuffed into a bucket in the front yard. She had been beaten and strangled to death, and Landon's suspicious absence quickly landed her at the top of the suspect list. Doorbell camera footage from neighbors' homes showed Landon calmly pulling the bucket containing Fontenelle's body in a wagon the previous night. She was located at a local hospital, where she had been taken for a mental evaluation after showing up at the police station hours before her boyfriend awoke to notice that she wasn't home. Following her discharge from the hospital, Landon was booked into jail on a murder charge. During her trial in April 2025, the defense argued that she was experiencing a psychotic break when she killed her stepdaughter. Landon had appeared to be hallucinating and suffering from paranoia when she was taken to the hospital, and she claimed to have a very limited memory of what happened on the night of Fontenelle's death. One of the things she did remember was listening to Frank Sinatra and hugging the bucket containing the victim's body for comfort. An expert who testified for the defense acknowledged that Landon seemed to be suffering possible symptoms of a psychotic break, but said that they were unable to tell for sure due to her impaired memory and the lack of witnesses at the time of the killing. But the jury was unconvinced by the defense's version of events, and Landon was found guilty of first-degree murder and 2 counts of obstruction of justice, resulting in a mandatory life sentence without parole. Number 12. Kenneth Farler III. In April 2024, police in Dayton, Ohio, responded to a 911 call from Kenneth Farler III, who claimed that his non-verbal autistic stepson had fatally shot his teenage daughter, Kendra May Farler. This claim was corroborated by the boy's mother, but police immediately noticed inconsistencies in their stories, suspecting that Kenneth was being untruthful. Investigators questioned him further, and he eventually admitted that he had shot his own daughter. Kenneth had an extensive criminal history consisting of at least 40 arrests over a 20-year period. At the time of Kendra's death, he was on probation for a cocaine trafficking conviction. He was also wanted on a warrant for lying about where he lived and failing to check in with his probation officer. Some law enforcement experts and officials believed he should have been in jail or prison for his previous cases, and that at the very least, probation could have done a better job at verifying his address. Following Kendra's death, Kenneth was charged with involuntary manslaughter, reckless homicide, child endangerment, and gun-related counts. But the tragedy was no accident, according to police, who claimed that Kendra had begged her father to stop pointing his gun at her before she was killed. In April of 2025, Kenneth pleaded guilty as charged. He's currently awaiting sentencing. Number 11. Rebecca Sayegh. A New Jersey couple was watching TV inside their Berkeley Township home late one night in April of 2025 when someone smashed the front door window and let themselves inside. It was the man's ex-girlfriend, a 32-year-old local police officer named Rebecca Sayegh, and she was furious. According to police, Sayegh screamed at the couple and became physically violent, poking the man's new girlfriend in the eye and smashing items throughout the house. The victims ran outside and called 911, and officers arrived right as Sayegh was exiting the house. She resumed her irate behavior upon being told that she was under arrest and resisted officers while threatening to burn her ex's house down. Sayegh was charged with home invasion burglary, 2 counts of assault, 2 counts of criminal mischief, terroristic threats, and resisting arrest. Several days later, the judge overseeing her case released her under the strict condition that she attend an inpatient mental health program where she'll spend 30 to 90 days receiving treatment. In the meantime, she's banned from having any contact with her ex, who has obtained a temporary order of protection. Number 10. The death of Glenn Smallwood Jr. In June of 2023, 33-year-old U.S. military veteran Glenn Smallwood Jr. was arrested in Lufkin, Texas, on a public intoxication charge. He was taken to the Angelina County Jail to sober up, where he was placed in a restraint chair in accordance with the facility's policies, but Smallwood had already been exhibiting worrisome symptoms of a possible medical crisis when he first arrived, including paranoia, confusion, sweating, shaking, and unsteadiness. His condition deteriorated after being strapped into the chair. He began vomiting and became listless, and body cam footage would later show that corrections officers stood around laughing and joking about his sickness. One guard could be heard joking about how he might throw up if he sees that again. Smallwood was placed in a detox holding cell where he continued retching and moaning until he fell unconscious. A nurse briefly checked on him before leaving the cell, and Smallwood was found dead 15 minutes later. At the time of Smallwood's arrest, a psychiatric hospital had issued a mental health warrant for him to be involuntarily brought to the facility. He suffered from schizoaffective disorder and had recently sought help, but had left before getting the medication he needed to control his symptoms, instead self-medicating with methamphetamine. The officers who arrested Smallwood took him to jail despite the mental health warrant dictating his need for hospitalization. His surviving family members are suing for wrongful death, but there do not appear to be any criminal charges against the defendants named in the civil case or the officers who were involved in Smallwood's arrest and detention. Number 9. Dustin Fields. In early May of 2025, emergency responders were called to a house fire in Frankfort, Kentucky, where firefighters found 2 deceased teenage boys and the body of their pet dog after extinguishing the flames. Bentley Maxwell Fields and his older brother, Rylan Austin Fields, had gotten trapped in the blaze, which police say was deliberately set by their father, 43-year-old Dustin Fields. According to court documents, Dustin had started the fire using an accelerant, which was detected near the boys' bodies. He was not present at the scene when emergency responders first arrived, but he appeared several minutes later during questioning. He reportedly provided conflicting stories about what had happened, and there was accelerant on his shoes. Dustin was arrested on a first-degree arson charge, and additional charges may be forthcoming. During an initial court hearing, he pleaded not guilty and asked the judge for permission to attend his son's funeral, stating, "I miss my boys." The request was denied, and Dustin remains in custody as the investigation continues. Number 8. Gregory Moore. In a case that went unsolved for more than a decade, 53-year-old Eliza Sherman was murdered outside her divorce attorney's Cleveland, Ohio law firm in 2013. She was waiting to be let into the office for a planned meeting with her lawyer when she was chased down from behind and stabbed 10 times. Investigators were quick to suspect Sherman's attorney, Gregory Moore, but for a long time, they didn't have a solid enough case to bring charges against him. Their suspicions only grew over the years, especially after Moore was caught calling in bomb threats to delay clients' court hearings that he wasn't prepared for, leading to the theory that he had killed Sherman because he wasn't ready for her upcoming divorce hearing. In 2016, Moore was charged with 16 crimes related to the bomb threats and for lying about Sherman's death. He pleaded guilty to falsification and inducing panic and was sentenced to 180 days in jail. Finally, in May of 2025, Moore was indicted on charges of aggravated murder, conspiracy, and kidnapping. He was arrested in Texas and is currently awaiting extradition to Ohio, where he'll finally face justice in the 12-year-old case. Number 7. Jaime Caldwell. 29-year-old schoolteacher Jaime Caldwell was driving to her job in Lexington, Kentucky on the morning of April 16, 2025, when she fatally struck a pedestrian, later identified as 32-year-old Joshua Hampton. The victim died 2 days later from multiple blunt force trauma injuries caused by the impact of the collision. Caldwell fled the scene, but investigators were able to track her vehicle to a local elementary school, where the car was sitting in the parking lot with visible damage. Officers observed several signs of intoxication, including bloodshot, watery eyes, and an odor of alcohol. During questioning, Caldwell reportedly admitted to drinking Bacardi rum the previous night and taking various prescription pills that morning. She also admitted to hearing a thud while driving to work, but claimed that she was unaware she had hit someone. Her blood alcohol content tested at 3 times the legal limit, and she was arrested on charges of aggravated operating a motor vehicle under the influence of alcohol, and 1 count of leaving the scene of an accident with failure to render aid or assist with death or serious physical injury. A grand jury will now be tasked with deciding whether she'll face heightened charges due to Hampton's death. Number 6. George Dodson. On July 20th, 2022, firefighters responded to a house fire in New London, Connecticut, where they found the body of 23-year-old Shelby Dodson. After extinguishing the blaze, Shelby had suffered significant trauma to the head and torso, indicating foul play. Her young son had also been left to die in the flames but was rescued alive. The crime was traced to Shelby's husband, 26-year-old George Dodson, who admitted that he had intended to kill his family that day. He confessed to bludgeoning Shelby to death with a hammer, telling investigators that the couple had opened up their marriage and his wife had found another man she loved more. Unable to bear that thought, George decided that Shelby needed to die. In February of 2025, he pleaded guilty to murder, arson, and endangering the life of his son. He's currently serving a 50-year prison sentence without parole and is scheduled to be released in the year 2072 at the age of 73. Number 5. Nicodemo Sansalone and Francesco Sansalone. When 41-year-old Alassi Tukiapik vanished in March of 2023, her friends and family repeatedly paid visits to the Montreal home of her boyfriend, 63-year-old Francesco Frank Sansalone, and his brother, 61-year-old Nicodemo Sansalone, but the brothers refused to let anyone inside. The missing woman's family contacted the authorities in September of that year, and police went to the Sansalone's neighborhood in search of leads. The brothers initially refused to answer the door, but Nicodemo came outside just a few minutes later and blatantly told an officer that Tukiapik's body was in his house on the living room sofa where it had been for the last 6 months. Sure enough, officers found Tukiapik's heavily decomposed corpse, and the Sansalones were arrested for failing to notify the authorities of her death and mishandling her body. According to Frank, Tukiapik died from a medical emergency. He claimed that he didn't call the authorities because he was afraid Tukiapik's family would kill him. While living with the remains, he and Nicodemo used air freshener to mask the odor of decomposition and avoided the living room. They both pleaded guilty to the charges and were awaiting sentencing, according to the most recent updates on the case. Number 4. Jack Dennis Potter. In October 2003, San Diego sheriff's deputies responded to the discovery of a woman's severed legs inside a dumpster. The identity of the person they belonged to remained a mystery until 2020, when the victim was identified as Lori Potter. She was 54 years old when she died and had never been reported missing. In 2021, authorities charged Lori's husband, 68-year-old Jack Dennis Potter, with her murder. Prosecutors accused the defendant of killing his wife so he could carry on his affair with an exotic dancer, while pocketing the profits from the sale of his home and using Lori's good name to take out credit cards. Jack blew the ill-gotten money on vehicles, including a boat, a pickup truck, and Hummer for his girlfriend. He also opened a credit card with a $30,000 limit for his girlfriend and paid for her apartment. And when Lori's identity was no longer useful for gaining money, Jack successfully divorced her in her absence. In February 2025, Jack pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison and will be in his 80s when he sees his first chance at freedom. Number 3. Cody Vernon Kolstad. Shortly after midnight on May 21st, 2022, deputies responded to a home in the small town of Morristown, Minnesota, where they were met by 35-year-old Cody Vernon Kolstad. Kolstad had told a 911 dispatcher that his roommate was dead and to send the coroner, but he told the responding deputies that his roommate was badly injured. Inside the home, the police found 41-year-old Brian Daniel Stokel dead in his bed. He had been shot in the neck by Kolstad, who claimed that he killed Stokel in a drug-induced haze after the victim had said that one of them needed to die that night. Kolstad became emotional during questioning as he apparently realized the gravity of his actions and that he had taken a human life. In March of 2025, nearly 3 years after the killing, he pleaded guilty to intentional second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with credit for nearly 3 years of time served, and the judge urged him to use that time wisely to take classes and better himself, so that he's an improved person when he re-enters the free world. Today's topic was requested by Kaiser1993. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jeremy Jones. After his son injured himself in a bicycle accident in 2010, Jeremy Jones and his wife filed a false insurance claim stating that the boy had permanently lost sight in one of his eyes. The British couple submitted a forged medical letter as so-called proof of the injury, and although it was fraught with errors, the insurance company fell for the scam and issued a payout of more than $90,000. The Joneses would have likely gotten away with this first act of fraud if they hadn't tried to pull it off again less than 2 years later, when they claimed that Mrs. Jones had gone deaf in one ear. Once again, they provided a forged medical letter, but this time it caught the attention of insurance specialists, at which point the couple became uncooperative. An investigation was launched, and in June of 2014, the pair were each charged with 2 counts of fraud and 2 counts of forgery. 4 months later, they were both convicted of 1 count of fraud and 2 counts of forgery, and were each sentenced to a year of jail time. Stick around after number 1 to watch our long release about when getting yourself into trouble goes wrong. That's coming up right after this. Number 1. Jayvaun Prince. 68-year-old Irene Taliambouris was walking up the front steps of a Greek Orthodox church in the Briarwood neighborhood of Queens, New York, in April 2024 when a young man stepped in front of her and pushed her. She fell backwards and hit her head on the concrete, causing a brain bleed and a skull fracture. Before fleeing the scene in the victim's vehicle, the attacker rifled through her pockets. Identified by police as Jayvaun Prince, the suspect has a lengthy history of run-ins with law enforcement. At the time of the attack on Taliambouris, he was already wanted for allegedly stealing a 50-year-old woman's vehicle 3 days earlier. According to police, Prince had followed the previous victim from an ATM. He proceeded to corner and threaten her inside an elevator, prompting her to hand over her wallet and car keys. Prince was also wanted for another robbery that had taken place several months earlier, but his criminal history dates back even further to the fall of 2023, when he was arrested on suspicion of 6 robberies that occurred over a 6-month period throughout Queens. Between then and early 2024, he was charged with 2 assaults. Following his arrest for the attack on Taliambouris, Prince faced 5 felony charges, including robbery, assault, and grand larceny. He was detained without bail, but police officials and the victim's family were outraged that he was free to assault Taliambouris to begin with, given his already lengthy history of arrests. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of the case unclear. Number 7. Keith Smith. Roughly half an hour past midnight on December the 1st of 2018, Maryland police were dispatched to a home in the 1000 block of Valley Street, Baltimore, after they'd received reports of a violent altercation on the premises. Upon their arrival, officers learned that 52-year-old Jacqueline Smith had been fatally stabbed after stopping to give money to a panhandler. The victim's husband, Keith, told investigators that they'd been returning home after celebrating their daughter's birthday. He went on to say that he and his wife had driven by a woman carrying an infant in one arm and in the other a sign that read, "Please help me feed my baby." According to Keith's account of the incident, he pulled up next to the woman so that Jacqueline could hand her $10 through the car window. In the moments that followed, she was allegedly attacked by a man who was described as being in his 30s. Initial reports on the matter portrayed Keith as a traumatized victim who'd been an eyewitness to his own wife's murder. However, it emerged during the course of the police's investigation that his original testimony had been filled with inconsistencies and lies.
his grieving husband facade, much like the rest of the story, had been a fabrication meant to distract investigators from the fact that he'd actually been responsible for Jacqueline's death. As was detailed by the Baltimore City State's attorney, the woman was actually asleep when the fatal stabbing occurred, and Keith himself had carried out her killing in order to secure a life insurance payout. The couple's adult daughter, Valeria, had allegedly helped her father cover up the murder by corroborating his false report about the panhandlers. In exchange for a lighter prison sentence, Valeria ultimately agreed to testify against her father in court. In December of 2021, Keith was found guilty of first-degree murder and carrying a dangerous weapon with intent to injure, and he was consequently sentenced to life in prison plus 3 years. Number 6. Edawn Lewis Kaufman. After receiving reports of a burglary in progress on the night of September the 11th of 2019, police in Gwinnett County, Georgia, headed to a local business called Create and Bake Restaurant and Kaufman's Creamery. The 911 caller had told the emergency dispatcher that a suspect driving a black Chevrolet Silverado with no license plate had broken into the bakery and was damaging the property inside. Officers searched the surrounding area and eventually came upon the vehicle described by the witness. Its driver, former professional football player Edawn Lewis Kaufman, reportedly had several television sets in the bed of the truck as well as inside the cabin. Kaufman was identified as the owner and operator of the bakery that had been reported as burglarized. Upon inspecting the purported crime scene, investigators saw that a number of racially derogatory phrases and symbols had been spray painted onto the walls and booth cushions. Among the messages written during the extended act of vandalism were the initials MAGA, in reference to former President Donald Trump's campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." Law enforcement found shattered mirrors, sliced wires, and a destroyed video surveillance system as well. Kaufman claimed to have noticed the damage to his business earlier in the day, but had neglected to call the police. Following further investigation, however, it was determined that the destruction had occurred much later than Kaufman had initially stated. The authorities therefore concluded that the business owner had caused the damage himself in order to make it appear as though he'd been the victim of a hate crime. The fraudulent course of action would have allowed him to file a claim with his insurance company. Kaufman was ultimately arrested on charges of filing a false report of a crime, insurance fraud, and concealing a license plate. As of recent updates on the case, the charges levied against Kaufman were still pending, and he'd also been charged with aggravated assault and robbery for incidents unrelated to the burglary hoax. Number 5. Sabrina Belcher. In 2020, South Carolina rapper Sabrina Belcher ran to be the first African-American mayor in the town of Sumter. During the 29-year-old's campaign, reports surfaced that she'd been kidnapped, beaten, and robbed by an unknown assailant. The incident was streamed in its entirety via Facebook Live. Shortly before 11:30 p.m. on August the 18th of 2020, Belcher was taken to Prisma Health Toomey Hospital, where she was treated for the injury she alleged to have sustained during the assault, which had also resulted in her car windows being shattered. Much of the footage depicting the altercation was obscured by darkness, but Belcher's supposed attacker threatened to kill her multiple times before striking her in the stomach with a metal bat. The video came to an abrupt end as Belcher was being forcibly dragged from the car. A few days later, it emerged that Sumter police had actually taken Belcher into custody on charges of conspiracy and filing a false police report. The charges accompanied the revelation that the woman had staged her kidnapping in an effort to portray herself as an oppressed victim and, in effect, gain sympathy votes from the general public. The man pretending to be her attacker in the Facebook Live clip was identified as Christopher Eady, who was also arrested according to the resulting police report. In the immediate aftermath of Belcher's detainment, she chose to remain in the race for Sumter's mayor. However, in November of 2020, former city council member David Merchant won the election. In September of the following year, Belcher reportedly pleaded guilty to the charges levied against her, and she was consequently ordered to serve 3 years of probation and perform 80 hours of community service. Number 4. Leah Jumeaux. In October of 2020, pictures of British woman Leah Jumeaux bound and gagged next to a gun was sent to her ex-boyfriend. The messages, purportedly coming from the 20-year-old woman's kidnapper, indicated that she would only be returned unharmed in exchange for a ransom of approximately $2,500. When the police were notified of the situation, investigators quickly uncovered multiple inconsistencies in the story as it had been presented to Jumeaux's ex-boyfriend. It subsequently emerged that the young woman had staged her own kidnapping in order to swindle her former partner out of money, which she reportedly intended to use to buy Christmas presents for her family. Jumeaux was consequently arrested and charged with blackmail and fraud by false representation. In January of 2022, she reached a deal with prosecutors in which she admitted guilt to the lesser charge of fraud in exchange for a sentence of 34 weeks in jail. Jumeaux was also reportedly ordered to pay $200 in restitution to her former boyfriend. Number 3. Rebecca Palmer. In 2015, Rebecca Palmer made a series of allegations, including of assault, fraud, and blackmail, against a soldier based at the UK military installation in Tidworth. The soldier, who reportedly served with the King's Royal Hussars and was aged 20 at the time of his alleged crimes, was detained and questioned for more than 19 hours. After he was released on bail, 26-year-old Palmer accused him of violating the conditions of his discharge by stalking and harassing her. She also allegedly sent threatening messages to the man's mother and her friends. Shortly thereafter, the police determined that each of Palmer's allegations against the soldier had been completely fabricated. Subsequent reports detailed how she'd pretended to be a victim of the man's abuse, thereby making his life a living hell in an act of retaliation against him. The woman's anger reportedly stemmed from the unnamed soldier rejecting her romantic advances. Following a criminal trial at Winchester Crown Court, Palmer was convicted of 4 counts of perverting the course of justice, as well as 5 additional counts of sending malicious communications, to which she pleaded guilty. She was consequently sentenced to spend 5 years behind bars, a term deemed excessive by her lawyers, as they felt it didn't take into account her reported significant mental health difficulties. Number 2. Chris Hollingsworth. Louisiana State Trooper Chris Hollingsworth died after crashing into a highway guardrail in Monroe in the early morning hours of September the 21st of 2020. Days earlier, the 46-year-old police veteran had been interviewed by internal investigators about the 2019 arrest of motorist Ronald Green. The latter had reportedly been shocked with a taser and beaten to death with a flashlight following a high-speed chase in northeast Louisiana. As was captured by Hollingsworth's body cam, he'd initially boasted to fellow officers about brutally beating the man to the point of him being bloodied and barely conscious, in spite of the fact that he'd been apologetic and cooperative with the police. Upon being formally questioned about the incident, Hollingsworth's self-assured demeanor shifted to one of trepidation as he attempted to convey that he'd acted out of fear upon ruthlessly attacking Green. He attempted to portray himself as the victim in the situation, claiming to have been scared of what Green might do to him if left unrestrained. Detectives investigating the matter ultimately determined that Hollingsworth's revised version of the events didn't align with the facts of the case, deduced from body and dash cam footage. Due to his sudden death, the officer was never criminally charged in connection to Green's killing. Number 1. Samantha Alonzo Luna. Shortly before 8:30 p.m. on June the 16th of 2018, officers from the Humboldt State University Police Department in Arcata, California, initiated a traffic stop after witnessing the passenger of a vehicle recklessly hanging their head out of the sunroof. In a series of videos later posted to Facebook, 5 members of law enforcement were shown getting into an altercation with another one of the car's occupants, 20-year-old Samantha Alonzo Luna. As indicated by subsequent reports, she'd refused to properly identify herself to Officer Janelle Jackson, which led to a heated verbal exchange between them. As tensions escalated, Alonzo Luna was pulled from the front passenger seat of the vehicle, at which point a second officer assisted Jackson in subduing her. Alonzo Luna proceeded to shout a barrage of profanities at the officers as she kicked and fought them hysterically. At one point, the young woman allegedly grabbed the hair of one officer and refused to loosen her grip until she was finally placed in handcuffs and forced into the back of a cruiser. Court records detailed how in the incident's aftermath, Alonzo Luna was charged with 7 misdemeanors, including giving false information to a police officer, public intoxication, battery on a peace officer, and 4 counts of resisting officials. As of the latest updates on the case, it was reported that a plea deal was being negotiated between Alonso Luna and state prosecutors. Number 10. Tiago Felipe Souza Braganza and Walderson Junior da Silva. In January of 2020, a Brazilian model named Ana Braga suddenly vanished from her California home. The 24-year-old had moved to Los Angeles in 2019 to further her modeling career, but January the 29th marked the last time anybody had heard from her. Braga knew 2 other Brazilian nationals, Tiago Felipe Souza Braganza and Walderson Junior da Silva, also staying in California at the time. The woman's friends reported that she'd become distant after getting romantically involved with one of the men. One night, video surveillance captured Braga entering her home with the pair, who later claimed they were high on an illicit substance. They maintained that Braga had brandished a knife at them and, while acting in self-defense, they'd fatally strangled her with a power cord. However, in a video they'd taken just moments after killing her, Braganza and Silva were heard mocking the woman. Her body could be seen laying face down with a cord wrapped around her neck before the duo hid her in a comforter. Surveillance video captured the men leaving Braga's home while carrying the comforter. They placed the model's body into her car and subsequently drove 1,300 miles to Oklahoma City. Weeks later, on February the 12th, police found her empty vehicle in the parking lot of a casino. Surveillance video from February the 1st showed Braganza and Silva abandoning Braga's car before getting into a green minivan. They then fled to Mexico before catching a flight back to Brazil. On February the 22nd of 2020, both men were arrested in the South American country and admitted to murdering Braga. Number 9. Maury Travis. In May of 2002, Maury Travis, also known as the St. Louis Killer, was arrested in connection to a string of deaths in the area. Between March of 2001 and May of 2002, Travis was proven to have been responsible for the murder of at least 12 escorts, whose bodies were found along roadsides throughout the city. Police sorted through several pieces of evidence that pointed to Travis, including a map that the man himself had anonymously sent to the authorities with the location of one of his victims' bodies. Investigators were able to trace the map back to Travis's computer. When they searched his home, the police found a chamber in his basement where they determined he tormented his victims before killing them. Recordings were found that showed abuse, torture, and at least one instance of Travis strangling a woman to death. He admitted to committing 17 murders, but only 12 bodies were found. Travis was arrested on June the 7th of 2002, but just 3 days later was found dead in his cell after he'd hung himself. Number 8. Richard Davis and Dina Riley. In 2006, Missouri police discovered the body of Michelle Huff-Rishi, burnt and buried in a shallow grave. Investigators found evidence that linked Richard Davis and his girlfriend, Dina Riley, to the crime. However, by the time the connection was made, the couple had fled and gone into hiding. While searching their home, the police came upon graphic videos that showed the couple torturing and abusing both Huff-Rishi and another woman, Marsha Spicer, whose body was also found in a shallow grave. After an 8-day manhunt, the police eventually captured the couple. Davis received the death penalty while Riley was given 9 consecutive life sentences for the murders. In December of 2020, it was announced that Davis had died behind bars at the age of 56. Number 7. Gregory Graf. 33-year-old Jessica Paget's mother reported her missing after she disappeared from her Pennsylvania home on November the 21st of 2014. During an extensive 5-day search, the police questioned Paget's stepfather, Gregory Graf, whose story about what had happened was inconsistent. Graf eventually confessed to the authorities that he had shot Paget in the back of the head and recorded himself abusing her corpse before hiding it on his property. At his trial in 2015, the jury only needed 6 minutes to convict Graf of first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison. Number 6. Deirdre Hunt and Konstantinos Fotopoulos. In 1990, Mark Kevin Ramsey went out to the woods west of Daytona Beach, Florida, with Konstantinos Fotopoulos and his girlfriend, Deirdre Hunt, in what he thought was an official initiation into a criminal club. The 19-year-old knew that Fotopoulos was a counterfeiter and was interested in being part of his operation. However, Fotopoulos had no real intention of allowing Ramsey on the inside. The problem was the latter already knew too much and had threatened to blackmail the former. Hunt later alleged that Fotopoulos had forced her to take part in a scheme of luring Ramsey into the woods to kill him, threatening to do the same to her if she didn't go along with it. Once they got there, Fotopoulos started videotaping with a camcorder as Hunt shot Ramsey 4 times, thrice in the chest and once in the head. The recording was used as compelling evidence during their trial that resulted in both Hunt and Fotopoulos being sentenced to death. However, 8 years later, Hunt's sentence was reduced to 2 terms of life in prison. Number 5. Jamel Dunn. On July the 9th of 2017, Jamel Dunn, a 31-year-old Florida man, struggled to stay afloat after entering a pond. A group of 5 teenagers between the ages of 14 and 18 happened to be on the shore when Dunn called out for help. Instead of intervening, they got out their phones and started recording while they mocked him and laughed at his pleas for assistance. They filmed him for over 2 minutes as he drowned, and after Dunn's death, didn't alert anybody. His family desperately searched for him in the aftermath, and it wasn't until 5 days later that police found his body in the pond. Despite video evidence of the teen's complacency, a judge argued that while there may have been a moral obligation to help, there wasn't a legal one, as there was no law in Florida that required a person to provide emergency assistance. However, the Cocoa Police Department intended to charge the teens with a misdemeanor for not complying with Florida Statute 406, which stated that it was a person's responsibility to report a death if they saw one. The conviction would have only meant a punishment of a $1,000 fine per person, and the state attorney ultimately decided not to press charges. Number 4. Cemeren Yilmaz. On September the 16th of 2018, a UK teen was fatally beaten and stabbed by 4 other teens in what was believed to have been a gang-related incident. The victim, Cemeren Yilmaz, had ties to the Mile Road gang, while his killers, Aaron Miller, Caleb Brown, Jacob Morgan, and Ramon Juana, were part of a rival gang called the Black Tom Gang. Investigators uncovered video footage that showed prior tension building up between Yilmaz and his rivals before the attack against him took place. The 4 teens recorded the entire incident on Snapchat, which included the stabbing, beating, and bludgeoning of Yilmaz with a hammer. His friend called for help and the teen was rushed to the hospital, where he died the next day. All 4 youths were found guilty at their trial and sentenced to life in prison. Miller was given a minimum of 21 years. Brown and Juana were sentenced to a minimum of 17 years, and Morgan was sentenced to serve a minimum of 16 years. Number 3. Bethany Martin. In July of 2021, Bethany Martin, then in her late teens, was walking through a Texas neighborhood with her friend when they came across the body of a 25-year-old man in a drainage ditch. Martin's friend took a video which they later posted to Snapchat of her removing a necklace from the dead man's corpse. The friend also took the pendant from the necklace with the intention of keeping it, stating that it matched her style. The girls then called the police to report the body. During the investigation that followed, law enforcement was informed of Martin's video, which had since gone viral. Upon seeing the recording, the police arrested and charged Martin as an adult with felony theft from a human corpse or grave, but she was released on $2,000 bail. The friend who was with her also faced charges, but due to her younger age, she was charged as a minor. The man was identified as Marcus Adams. The pendant that the girls had stolen was returned to Adams's family. Number 2. Mark Masters and Sean Thompson. In September of 2008, 3 English teenagers, 19-year-old Mark Masters, Sean Thompson aged 17, and a younger female friend were involved in brutally attacking an innocent man, which ultimately led to his death. Masters and Thompson were playing Happy Slap, a gruesome game that essentially involved beating up random people on the street. On one particular day, the trio targeted 29-year-old Gavin Waterhouse. Masters and Thompson asked their friend to record the attack with her phone while they assaulted him. In spite of his injuries and losing consciousness, Waterhouse initially survived his ordeal. However, he didn't go to a hospital for treatment and died 3 days later from a ruptured spleen. The teens posted the video online, which was used as evidence to convict them for the attack. Masters was sentenced to 7 years and Thompson to 6 years in juvenile detention facilities for manslaughter, while the friend who recorded the attack received 2 years for aiding and abetting. Number 1. Luca Magnotta. In 2010, Canadian man Luca Magnotta started uploading gruesome videos that showed him killing kittens, but at the time nobody knew who he was. Groups of animal rights activists made it their mission to bring the individual behind the horrific footage to justice. After following up on clues from the clips, internet sleuths were able to uncover his identity. When they alerted the police, however, nothing came of it, which allowed Magnotta to continue posting similar content. Then, in 2012, he uploaded a video on a whole other level. In it, he was on top of a nude, bound Chinese man, later named as Justin Lin. Magnotta stabbed him 100 times with an ice pick and dismembered his body. The police was contacted and the killer was promptly put on Interpol's most wanted list. He was found within a month and arrested at a cyber cafe in Berlin. His 2014 trial resulted in him being sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. The case was featured in Netflix's massively successful true crime documentary series, Don't F with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer. Number 8. Emma and Valerie Daly. At about 2 a.m. on November the 20th of 2021, Englishwoman Natalie Bell was talking to a friend in Manchester city centre when she became the victim of a brutal, unprovoked attack. 25-year-old Emma Daly, who was 6.5 months pregnant at the time, was identified as a main aggressor in a group that charged Bell. Emma's younger sister Valerie ran up to the woman and punched her in the back of the head. Joining the Daly sisters in the attack was Valerie's girlfriend, 20-year-old Chelsea Leary. As shown by CCTV footage, the trio kicked Bell in the face and body after she'd collapsed to the ground. Emma pulled the victim back as she tried to crawl away and, along with the others, continued raining down strikes on her. Bell was left with a black eye, cuts and swelling to her right eye, injuries to her nose as well as bruising to her ribs. The attack had reportedly stemmed from an unspecified grudge, and the trio were arrested in the aftermath. Leary admitted assault and was given a 12-month jail sentence, suspended for 2 years. Emma and Valerie pleaded guilty to assault, occasioning actual bodily harm, and were jailed for 14 months each. For the former, it meant that she'd have to give birth while behind bars. The Daly sisters had a history of trouble with the law. Emma had 19 offenses on her record, some of which included assaulting police, while Valerie had been involved in a racist gang attack on an Afro-Caribbean hair and makeup artist in 2018. The woman was verbally abused, subjected to racial slurs, and reportedly told to go back to her country. She was also physically assaulted, suffering cuts and bruising to her head while also having clumps of hair ripped out of her scalp. Number 7. Justin Balboa. 31-year-old Justin Balboa was acting tough and gesturing arm wrestling techniques while heavily intoxicated at a restaurant called B Square Burgers in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on June the 27th of 2021. A bystander then captured the man on cell phone video as he stepped back and bumped into another of the bar's patrons. He was later identified as mixed martial artist and elite Muay Thai kickboxer Joe Schilling. The 37-year-old gently moved Balboa out of his way and continued walking. Balboa then shouted something at Schilling, prompting him to turn around, at which point Balboa lunged at him. Fight analysts commented on the footage would later note that the movement was indicative of him gearing up to throw a right hand at Schilling. The professional fighter reacted before that could happen and landed a rapid punch combination to Balboa's head, which knocked him unconscious. After regaining consciousness, he called the police and told them that Schilling had hit him for no reason. The man was hospitalized with a head injury and eventually recovered, while a video of the knockout was widely shared online in the incident's wake. Commenting on what had happened on social media, the fighter maintained he'd acted in self-defense while also noting that Balboa had uttered racist remarks to the bar staff prior to the altercation. Sheridan later told a media outlet that no official charges had been filed against him. On July the 1st, Balboa filed a personal injury lawsuit against the fighter and the corporate entity behind B Square Burgers. The suit accused the pro fighter of battery and the establishment of negligence, seeking close to $100,000 in damages. Number 6. Juan Luis Lagunas Rosales. Teenage influencer Juan Luis Lagunas Rosales became popular on social media in his native Mexico through videos in which he drank heavily, as well as for his baby face and sense of humor. At the age of 15, before finishing high school, he moved to Culiacan, the capital and largest city of Sinaloa. The state was notorious for its criminal activity, with its eponymous cartel once headed by notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Rosales rose to fame through an internet persona he dubbed the Pirate of Culiacan and amassed close to 2 million followers across various social media platforms. Then in late 2017, the inebriated influencer was filmed insulting Mexico's most wanted man, drug lord Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes. Under his leadership, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel had become one of the country's leading criminal organizations, with much of his reputation relying on the aggressive use of extreme violence. The cartel had even been reported to cannibalize its victims, sometimes as training for new members. At the time that Rosales was filmed insulting Cervantes, both the US and Mexico were offering millions of dollars for information leading to the latter's capture. Weeks after posting the video, on December the 18th, Rosales was partying with his friends at the Mentados Cantaros bar in Jalisco and gave away his location on Instagram. A group of sicarios burst into the establishment at around 11 p.m. and opened fire on the influencer. He was shot 15 to 18 times and died on the spot, with his body subsequently identified via his tattoos. A 25-year-old bar employee was also gunned down, and no arrests were reported in connection to the incident in the immediate aftermath. Number 5. Autumn King. 20-year-old Texas woman Autumn King was taken into custody by the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force on January the 14th of 2019 in connection to the shooting death of her boyfriend, 26-year-old Eric Charles Allen. Officers from the Austin Police Department were called to their Rampart Street home on December the 23rd of the previous year. They found Allen with a gunshot wound, and the emergency services tried to save his life, but the man passed away before he could be transported to a hospital. Following her arrest, King told law enforcement that she and her boyfriend had tried to be like Bonnie and Clyde on Snapchat. Allen had tried to take a photo of her as she was aiming a loaded assault rifle at him. As recounted by King, she then mistakenly pressed the trigger and a bullet struck her boyfriend. At first, she thought he was playing a prank on her, but then called 911 upon realizing he was really hurt. A coroner listed the cause of the man's death as homicide, and King faced manslaughter charges. Number 4. Jayaganesh Eswaran. In January of 2020, personal trainer Harry Hronopoulos was kissing his girlfriend, Jade Konati, on the floor outside the Town Hall train station in Sydney's central business district. As shown by CCTV footage, which subsequently went viral, the couple were approached by 2 men, one of whom was named as Jayaganesh Eswaran. They started harassing the couple and insulted Konati, who then reportedly pushed Eswaran in the chest. A scuffle ensued and Hronopoulos intervened, fearing for the safety of his girlfriend. He traded several punches with the other men and eventually landed a powerful blow to Eswaran's chin, which knocked him out cold. The man fell to the concrete and suffered critical head injuries, which allegedly left him with memory problems following his recovery. Even though the footage in Konati's report seemingly confirmed that Hronopoulos had acted in his and his girlfriend's defense, he was arrested on charges of assault, recklessly occasioning grievous bodily harm. In April of 2021, however, his defense plea was accepted and he was cleared of any wrongdoing. Number 3. Fab Tanga. Leading up to July the 23rd of 2022, British Twitter user Fab Tanga had been pestering IBF flyweight world champion Sonny Edwards online. The former challenged the pro boxer to a fight, claiming they were both warriors, even though he was a novice, while Edwards had been ranked by BoxRec as the world's best active flyweight the year prior. Tanya, whom many described as an internet troll, then traveled 200 miles by train from London to the Sheffield gym, where 26-year-old Edwards trained. He posted a photo of himself outside of the building, prompting a video reply from the enraged boxing champion, who claimed he was on the way. Edwards, who at the time had his 2 young children in the car, showed up at the gym, and the ensuing bout was live streamed on social media. The professional boxer's superiority was evident throughout the session, as he kept his hands down and easily evaded the wild swings coming from the physically larger but evidently inexperienced Tanya. The pair reached the second round when Edwards struck the other man with a hard left hook to the head, which sent him with his back on the ropes. Exhaustion and the fear of incurring further damage led to Tanya quitting the bout. Both men exchanged complimentary tweets in the aftermath, with Edwards claiming Tanya had earned his respect and the latter praising the boxer as the UK's super champion. Number 2. Christopher Rivas. A man in West Covina, California, walked up to the front lobby of a local police station in February of 2017 while carrying an aluminium baseball bat. 28-year-old Christopher Rivas was caught by security cameras as he started hitting the bat against the station's glass windows. Terrified by his outburst, 3 women seated next to the windows in the lobby then ran to a secure area. Rivas stood in the sliding doors, threatening to enter and cause further mayhem. He took a few more swings at one of the doors as officers inside were preparing to intercept him. While Rivas was distracted, an unnamed officer who'd been outside as the incident was unfolding crept up behind him. He got within a few feet of the baseball bat wielder, then charged and forcefully tackled him. They both landed inside the police station, where other members of law enforcement subdued Rivas and took him into custody. No motive was disclosed for his attack on the station that resulted in the man being charged with assault with a deadly weapon and resisting arrest. Number 1. Erica Cole. Alabama woman Erica Cole was arrested in July of 2019 on charges of attempted murder, assault, and reckless endangerment. A heated road rage argument had occurred along Highway 69 in Dodge City, involving the 31-year-old, her husband, Nicholas, and another motorist. The confrontation culminated at a home in Bremen on County Road 160, where Erica brandished a pistol with the intention of shooting the unnamed person involved in the feud. She misaimed her weapon, however, and accidentally shot her husband in the head. The man was rushed to the intensive care at the UAB hospital and subsequently pronounced to be in stable condition. Emma was arrested, but it wasn't made immediately clear if she had any legal representation. An investigation was launched into the incident, which generated a number of conspiracy theories among internet users. The most prominent speculation was that Erica and the other motorists knew each other, and they deliberately set up the road rage confrontation so that she could kill Nicholas. Number 7. Ja'Cavious Smith. In December of 2021, Orlando rapper Ja'Cavious Smith, who performed under the name Glock 9 or 9 Lock 9, was sentenced to more than 7 years in federal prison after being indicted on federal firearms charges. Earlier in July, he pleaded guilty to possession of an unregistered firearm, using another person's identity, and committing a crime while on pretrial release. The penultimate charge followed an investigation which revealed that he'd used another name to fraudulently apply for and receive benefits through the Paycheck Protection Act. Smith, who went viral on TikTok with the song 223s, on which he was featured alongside YNW Melly, was also charged with attempted second-degree murder. In July of 2020, he'd opened fire on a house in Orlando, which was also occupied by a woman and her 3 children, reportedly targeting a rival rapper. No one was hurt, and the testimony of a witness who told the authorities Glock 9 wants to be Orlando's only rapper offered detectives some insight into Smith's murderous motivation. Number 6. Ishiwani. Former high school cheerleader Karina Slusser moved to New York City from a small town in rural Pennsylvania in the summer of 2017. Less than 2 months since her arrival in the metropolis, Slusser disappeared without a trace from a motel in the Queensboro, where rooms were rented by the hour. It later emerged that the young woman, then aged 19, had been ensnared in a human trafficking ring, offering escort services. Her first handler had been 32-year-old procurer Giovanni Puguero, who allegedly sold Slusser to various buyers with whom she was expected to engage in intimate relations. They stopped working together after an incident in August of 2017, when the young woman reportedly caught Peguero stealing $300 from her purse. Upon confronting him about the theft, she was slammed against a wall and choked. Slusser was granted a temporary restraining order against Peguero before, in early September, she became involved with a new procurer. He was aspiring rapper Ishiwani, a man in his early 20s who'd already been handling another woman when they met. He and Slusser exchanged roughly 800 messages from September the 10th to the 20th, and he'd posted an advertisement online offering a two-girl special providing photos of Slusser and the other victim. According to court records, Wani and Slusser eventually fell out after one of the rapper's other trafficking victims had grown jealous of their relationship. Slusser was last seen on September the 20th of 2017 when Wani left her at the Haven Motel in Queens in a room paid for by another man. In spite of their previous altercation that had resulted in an assault charge, Slusser sought Peguero's help over social media, telling him that Wani had left her with no money and food. They made plans to meet up, but it's unclear if they ever did, and the teen was never heard from again. The pending assault charges against Peguero were dismissed after Slusser failed to show up for a court hearing, but he adamantly denied having been the last person with her. In November of 2019, in Manhattan Federal Court, Wani was sentenced to 15 years in prison for human trafficking after he'd been arrested by the NYPD following an undercover operation. He denied having passed Slusser off to another procurer and claimed that he had no idea what had become of her or whether she was still alive. Number 5. Cameron Williams. Rapper Cameron Williams, better known by his stage name as C-Blue, got into a scuffle with NYPD officers in the Bronx on January the 18th of 2022. As he was being searched by 27-year-old officer Kasim Pennant, Williams was reported to have accidentally discharged a firearm. After the two had become embroiled in a physical altercation, a single bullet struck and injured Pennant while Williams himself was hit in the groin. Both subsequently recovered, with the rapper then in his late teens being taken to a juvenile detention center after receiving treatment. As reported by a local media outlet, Pennant was subsequently released from the hospital to the cheers of his fellow officers. Just 9 days after he'd been arrested, Williams walked free after posting his $250,000 bail, using money from his record deal advance on his contract with Interscope Records. The union representing NYPD officers was enraged by the judge's decision to grant the young offender bail, particularly since he'd already been on probation for a 2020 gun possession at the time of the shooting. Among those critical of the outcome was also New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who claimed, "It is further proof that our current system is failing us." According to updates on the case from mid-March of 2022, Bronx Supreme Court Justice Naita Sema recommended Williams be tried in family court rather than adult court, as she believed the NYPD had searched the teenage rapper without providing a legitimate reason. Number 4. Heather Morgan. In 2022, multiple media outlets revealed that an aspiring social media influencer and rapper had been officially charged in connection to one of the largest cryptocurrency heists ever reported. 31-year-old Heather Morgan, who performed as Razzle Khan, would often rap about her purported CEO lifestyle in her videos, which amassed hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube alone. The self-dubbed Crocodile of Wall Street performed a brand of hip-hop that was meant to exaggerate and give a somewhat comedic twist to various topics, including social distancing, fashion, and her purported financial prowess. She explained the name of her online rap persona, Razzle Khan, as inspired by Genghis Khan, but with more pizzazz. The case against Morgan originated in 2016 when the cryptocurrency exchange Bitfinex was hacked, resulting in the theft of 119,754 Bitcoin. At the time, it was worth an estimated $71 million, but considering the massive growth that the cryptocurrency subsequently experienced, the theft came to be valued at $4.5 billion. The money was siphoned out in more than 2,000 unauthorized transactions that funneled it into digital wallets, dispersing funds between Morgan and her husband, fellow tech entrepreneur Ilya Dutch Lichtenstein. The authorities were able to trace the money, and in what the DOJ reported as its largest financial seizure ever, recovered 94,000 Bitcoin, estimated at $3.6 billion, from a wallet controlled by Liechtenstein. Over the period of 5 years, the rest of the 25,000 Bitcoin had been transferred out of the wallet through an intricate money laundering process and spent on NFTs, gold, hotels, gaming consoles, Uber rides, and Walmart vouchers, among other items and services. On February 8th of 2022, Morgan was arrested in Manhattan, and if found guilty, she and Liechtenstein face up to 20 years in prison on charges of conspiracy to commit money laundering. As of the latest reports on the matter, Netflix had initiated efforts towards getting the rights to Razzle Khan's story. Number 3. Jamel Maurice Demons. Shortly after he was charged with double homicide in February of 2019, rapper Jamel Maurice Demons, better known as YNW Melly, enjoyed mainstream success and rose to the top of several charts with his song Murder on My Mind. He'd been charged alongside fellow rapper Cortland Henry for the murders of Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr. All 4 men were part of the same YNW hip-hop collective, and the authorities reported that Demons and Henry had conspired to kill the other 2 men and stage it to look like they'd fallen victims to a drive-by shooting. The double murder occurred in October of 2018 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Demons turned himself in on February the 13th of 2019 and announced on Instagram that a lot of rumors and lies were being said regarding the double murder. He and Henry were also reported as suspects in the fatal 2017 shooting of off-duty Indian River County Sheriff's Department Deputy Gary Chambliss in Gifford. Regarding the first-degree murder charges stemming from the deaths of Williams and Thomas, who performed as YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie, Demons pleaded not guilty, and his trial date was scheduled for May the 23rd of 2022. The 22-year-old's lawyers were concerned that lyrics from Murder on My Mind, one of which read, "I'm a murderer, yes, yes," might be used against him in court. While rumors arose in the aftermath that the song was a confession to the double homicide, with the controversy adding to its mainstream draw, it had actually been released a year prior to the shooting. Number 2. Fontrell Antonio Baines. 31-year-old rapper Nuke Bizzle, whose real name is Fontrell Antonio Baines, was ordered to stand trial on December the 29th of 2020 in downtown Los Angeles after being charged with access device fraud, aggravated identity theft, and interstate transportation of stolen property. Through his music and social media accounts, Baines openly bragged about getting rich by fraudulently obtaining jobless benefits under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Baines exploited the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance provision of the Act, designed to expand access to unemployment benefits to self-employed workers, independent contractors, and others who would not otherwise be eligible. He uploaded a video to YouTube which has been viewed over 350,000 times, entitled EDD, which is short for the Employment Development Department, the department that administered the benefits. In the shocking video, Baines basically gave up his entire illegal operation, and while holding up several envelopes from the EDD, rapped that he was getting rich by going to the bank with a stack of these, likely in reference to the debit cards that came in the mail from the department. Another man featured on the song further expanded on the delusional ingenuity of their money-making scheme by rapping, "You gotta sell cocaine, I just file a claim." Baines also bragged about defrauding the EDD on his Instagram. An investigation discovered at least 92 EDD debit cards preloaded with over $1.2 million in fraudulent obtained benefits mailed to addresses in Beverly Hills and Koreatown to which Baines had access. He and others involved in the operation had spent over $700,000 in cash from the cards. The rapper pleaded not guilty to the felony charges leveled against him, for which he faced a maximum sentence of 22 years in federal prison. Number 1. Qua'vion Wilson. In September of 2012, rapper Young QC, whose real name is Qua'vion Wilson, was at the funeral of his mother, Yolanda Holmes. Others in attendance remember that Wilson, an only child, seemed distant and unaffected by his mother's passing. 45-year-old Holmes, who owned the Nappy Head Salon in uptown Chicago, had been fatally stabbed and shot at her home in the 1000 block of West Montrose Avenue. While the incident, which occurred on September the 2nd, was initially investigated as a robbery gone wrong, it soon emerged that Wilson had hired a hitman to kill his mother. The reason, as reported by the authorities, had been financial gain and a desire for fame. As claimed by friends of the victim, Holmes would always financially help her son, spoiling him with expensive clothes and a Camaro, but he reportedly wanted more. Within a week of the woman's death, Wilson liquidated her bank accounts, which totaled over $90,000. And he was also the beneficiary of her 2 life insurance policies. The wannabe rapper used the money to fund and flaunt a lavish lifestyle across Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. His displays of wealth included him being in expensive cars, wearing designer clothing, or holding up massive stacks of cash. In one clip, he was seen giving back to his fans by launching $100 bills in the air to a frantic gathering. The authorities soon identified him as the mastermind of Holmes's murder, and he was arrested. Wilson was ultimately sentenced to 99 years in prison, just 1 year less than the sentence handed down to Eugene Spencer, the assassin he'd hired and whom he'd told in a phone conversation to make sure his mother was dead. Number 7. Umar Mirza. On March 27th of 2017, a man wearing a hood and a mask burst into a Paddy Power betting shop in Birmingham, England. He brandished a gun and demanded a female worker open the safe, then forced her to fill a carrier bag with $21,628 in cash, $466 in coins, and also $259 taken from the register. The robber removed his disguise as he left the establishment, and management was able to quickly identify him from CCTV footage as 26-year-old Umar Mirza. It later emerged that the man had made the starkly uninspired decision of robbing the same gambling parlor where he'd previously left a resume containing all of his personal information. He'd failed to secure the job, but it wasn't specified how much time had elapsed since he'd left the application. The police raided his home and found the carrier bag, an imitation firearm, and a betting slip on which he'd written, "I have got a gun. Open the door or I will shoot you." Mirza, who was described by his lawyer as a gambling addict, admitted robbery and possessing an imitation firearm and was jailed for 6 years at Birmingham Crown Court on August the 18th of that same year. Number 6. Annabella Dukes. A New Mexico teenager and her boyfriend were charged with murder in January of 2022, following a failed hostage scheme. A combination of successive, ill-fated decisions eventually resulted in the death of 24-year-old former correction officer Elias Otero. In February of 2021, his brother Nicholas was lured by 18-year-old Annabella Dukes to a late-night in-person meeting at an address in Albuquerque she'd claimed was her home. They then drove to Alvarado Park in Nicholas's red Lexus. As he later told the police, his suspicions had begun to mount as Dukes asked him about the necklace he was wearing, where he kept his cash, and if he had a gun in the car. Nicholas then spotted the teen secretly calling someone later identified as her boyfriend, Adrian Avila, on her cell phone and letting him listen to their conversation. By the time Nicholas realized he was being set up, a second vehicle approached his from behind. He was robbed at gunpoint by Avila and an accomplice before being forcefully driven to the home of his older brother, Elias. It was there that the kidnappers threatened to kill Nicholas unless Elias gave them more money. The latter emerged from the residence with a gun and warned the other men he was going to shoot them. Avila then opened fire on Elias, killing him in the street. Nicholas jumped from the car as the suspects fled and later alerted the authorities. Dukes had used Snapchat in order to initially lure Nicholas, thus leaving a traceable digital footprint. Through the social media platform, she'd also tricked a victim in a previous carjacking of the very same vehicle that was used to kidnap Nicholas. Avila turned himself into the authorities in late December, and Dukes was arrested the following month. They were each charged with murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy. Number 5. Bridget Ann Barnett. Alabama woman Bridget Ann Barnett was arrested by authorities in Tuscaloosa in January of 2013 after investigators found that she'd been selling marijuana out of a house across the street from a police station. It's unclear if the woman had been deliberately conducting the operation from the strategic perspective of hiding in plain sight, or if she'd been simply unaware of her proximity to the law enforcement headquarters. Sergeant Brent Blankley with Tuscaloosa Police described the 24-year-old's choice of location as very surprising after agents from the West Alabama Narcotics Task Force had executed a search warrant at the address and found marijuana along with drug paraphernalia. A graphic from Google Maps provided by the authorities showed that the house on Mill Creek Lane was only about the width of a parking lot from the station. Barnett was booked into Tuscaloosa County Jail on an $81,000 bond after being charged with 2 counts of first-degree distribution of marijuana, 1 count of possession of marijuana, and 1 count of possession of drug paraphernalia. Number 4. Deborah Hamill. On July the 16th of 2019, an Oklahoma woman had the very bad idea of fleeing from a police officer who conducted a traffic stop and then attacking him, even though she only risked an $80 fine for a broken tail light. The interaction was captured in its entirety by Officer Charles Missine's body cam. He asked 65-year-old Deborah Hamill about the faulty equipment, and she replied that the tail light had been out for 6 months but maintained she was going to fix it. Hamill then grew agitated when Missine wrote her an $80 ticket and refused to sign it. As tensions escalated, the officer ordered the woman to get out of the car and told her she was under arrest. Hamill didn't comply, told the officer to shut up, and then drove away. Missine got into his vehicle and chased her for several minutes. After Hamill eventually pulled over, he commanded her to exit the vehicle with his weapon drawn, but she continued being uncooperative. Missine holstered the firearm, then pulled the woman out of the car and pushed her onto the ground. Hamill rolled onto her back and, according to court documents, kicked the officer in the groin region, telling him, "I said leave me alone and I mean it." It was at that point that Missine pulled out his taser and fired it at Hamill, leaving her writhing in pain. Once handcuffed and inside the police cruiser, Hamill told the officer that he didn't have to use his taser on her, but Missine defended his actions, pointing to the woman's repeated defiance. When the officer mentioned the fact that she'd kicked him, Hamill claimed to have done so because she was a country girl. The encounter, which could have ended in a fine for the woman, concluded with her facing a charge of misdemeanor resisting arrest as well as a felony charge of battery or assault and battery on a police officer. Number 3. Clint Butler. In 2020, British man Clint Butler was serving a 17-year sentence for robbery and firearms offences at the Spring Hill Open Prison in Buckinghamshire, England. The convicted man, reported as being in his mid-30s, was expected to be released in 2024, but he escaped from prison at midnight on November the 28th. A major police manhunt ensued that for nearly 2 months made no significant progress. It was by chance occurrence and a very bad idea on Butler's part that he was eventually brought back into custody. On January the 13th of 2021, while patrolling in the area of Martineau Way in Birmingham City Centre, police constables Mark Owen and Alison Brown spotted 2 men. One of them abruptly changed direction upon being approached by the officers. Pandemic lockdown restrictions had been in place since January the 4th, with people urged to remain at home and only shop for basic necessities. Owen and Brown turned their body cameras on, then asked the pair why they were out and not adhering to the restrictions in place. One of the men, who would be later revealed as Butler, told them that he'd been shopping for the new Call of Duty game. Owen then informed the pair that he was going to check their personal information. In the moments that followed, as shown by body cam footage, Butler kicked Owen in the groin, but then slipped on the pavement while attempting to run away. The officers tackled him to the ground, and in the struggle that followed, Butler punched Brown in the face. The law enforcement officers called for backup and were assisted by nearby security guards towards incapacitating Butler. After being placed in handcuffs, he gave the officers a false name and admitted that he had cannabis on him, before eventually confessing that he was on the run. He was jailed for 13 months for absconding from prison and 6 months for assaulting the officers, with the sentences ordered to be served consecutively. West Midlands Police Superintendent Nick Rowe described Butler's decision to go out with a friend and buy a game in the middle of a lockdown while he was on the run from the authorities as idiotic and a mystery. Number 2. Douglas Peter Kelly. A Florida man was arrested for drug possession in 2018 after asking the police to test his methamphetamine and telling them he intended to press charges against his dealer. The bewildering case was shared on social media by the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, and it involved 49-year-old Douglas Peter Kelly. He reportedly called detectives in the drug unit and told them he'd suffered a violent reaction after smoking the methamphetamine he'd purchased a week earlier. Kelly wanted investigators to examine the product so that he could take legal action against the dealer for selling him the wrong drug. The detectives, albeit taken aback by the call, were happy to oblige and told Kelly to come down to the station, which he did. The man handed them a clear, crystal-like substance wrapped in aluminium foil that was later confirmed as methamphetamine. Kelly was arrested for possession and taken next door to the Putnam County Jail. In the viral Facebook post, the department encouraged others to come forward with their drugs, expressing the officers' readiness to assist them if they suspected to have been misled in their illegal purchase. Number 1. Cameron Jeffrey Wilson. 27-year-old Cameron Jeffrey Wilson ended up in the custody of authorities in Washington through a series of blunders that had begun with him accidentally shooting himself in the testicles on April the 5th of 2019. While at his Kashmir home, Wilson was carrying a handgun in his front pocket when the weapon went off, releasing a bullet that pierced his groin and thigh. The 13-time convicted felon told his girlfriend to get rid of the gun and then went to the hospital. Court records detail that as Wilson was being treated for the gunshot wound, a balloon of marijuana slipped out of his backside. He fled the scene but left his car behind, and police officers, who'd previously been alerted of the gunshot wound, searched the vehicle. They found a bag of methamphetamine in the blood-stained jeans that Wilson had been wearing when he shot himself. Law enforcement issued an arrest warrant, and on April the 18th, Wilson surrendered. He was taken for processing at the Chelan County Regional Justice Center where, as the man was being strip-searched, yet another bag of marijuana slipped out of his backside. The sequence of very bad ideas continued with Wilson placing several calls out of the jail, asking his girlfriend not to cooperate with the authorities. In spite of his lengthy criminal experience, Wilson failed to realize that the authorities were listening in on the calls. Wilson was held on a $110,000 bail after being charged with possession of a firearm, unlawful possession of meth, possession of a controlled substance in a correctional facility, and 4 counts of tampering with a witness. Number 7. Jake Lloyd. After starring opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in Jingle All the Way, child actor Jake Lloyd rose to worldwide fame after he was chosen by director George Lucas to play young Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace. The 1999 movie was one of the most highly anticipated productions of its time, but many felt it hadn't lived up to expectations for various reasons, including character and storyline choices. Even though 8-year-old Lloyd won a Young Artist Award for his performance, a portion of the harsh criticism was aimed at his acting. He consequently went through a period of severe emotional turmoil. He was reportedly bullied at school and harassed by the press for his role in The Phantom Menace to such a degree that he soon decided to retire from acting. In March of 2015, when Lloyd was in his mid-20s, the police were called to the Indianapolis home of his mother, Lisa Riley. She alleged that he'd arrived at her residence and verbally berated, then physically assaulted her. Riley declined to press charges, revealing that Lloyd suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and hadn't been taking his medication at the time. She would also later state that the former child actor had a symptom called anosognosia, meaning that he was unaware of his mental health condition. In June of that same year, Lloyd, who went by the surname Broadbent, was arrested in South Carolina. The sheriff's office had been alerted to a reckless driver. Lloyd sped away upon being approached by law enforcement, and a chase ensued on Interstate 95. During the pursuit, Lloyd reportedly drove at upwards of 100 miles. He crashed through a fence and went off-road, ultimately coming to a halt after crashing in some small trees. Lloyd was charged with reckless driving, driving without a license, and resisting arrest. He wasn't released on bail and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric facility. In 2020, his family announced that he'd moved closer to them and continued receiving treatment for his condition. Number 6. Haley Joel Osment. Haley Joel Osment began his acting career in the mid-1990s portraying Forrest Gump's son in the eponymous film that went on to win 6 Academy Awards. He rose to further prominence through the psychological thriller The Sixth Sense, which earned him an Academy Award nomination of his own, and by starring in Steven Spielberg's AI, Artificial Intelligence. Osment, who was still in his early teens, had become one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. As his once blooming career slowed in its ascension, Osment reportedly began struggling with substance abuse. One of his most notable legal troubles was a car accident in the summer of 2006 when he was only 18 years old. he lost control of his 1995 Saturn while driving through Glendale, California, then struck a mailbox which caused his vehicle to flip over. He managed to exit the Saturn on his own after suffering a broken rib and a fractured shoulder blade. Osment faced several charges that stemmed from him having had a blood alcohol level nearly twice the legal limit and for being in possession of marijuana. He faced jail time and ultimately pleaded no contest to driving under the influence of alcohol and misdemeanor drug possession. He was sentenced to 5 years probation, fined and ordered to undergo 60 hours in an alcohol rehabilitation and education program. In more recent years, another incident involving Osment took the form of a public meltdown at a Las Vegas airport in 2018. The child star, then aged 29, started shouting obscenities in the gate agent's face upon being informed that the flight was full. He was quoted as threatening, "I'll destroy you," and also shouting, "Do you know who I am?" According to witnesses at the scene, many hadn't, in fact, recognized Osment. The authorities were called, but it's unclear what charges, if any, the former child actor faced. Number 5. Shaun Weiss. Although he's made appearance on several successful TV series, Shaun Weiss is best known for his role as Greg Goldberg in the Mighty Ducks movies. The trilogy arguably represented the pinnacle of Weiss's acting career, but he would subsequently become the focus of media attention through a series of legal troubles, most noticeably since 2017. In July of that year, he was arrested for shoplifting close to $151 of electronics from a store. He pleaded no contest to petty theft charges and was sentenced to 150 days in the Los Angeles County Jail. Weiss served less than 2 weeks and was released due to overcrowding. 5 days after his newfound freedom, he was taken into custody for methamphetamine possession and ordered to spend 90 days in jail. In August of 2018, Weiss was arrested for public intoxication, with his mugshot showing the toll the addiction had taken on his body. He looked emaciated and ashen, nearly unrecognizable from the goalie he'd portrayed in Mighty Ducks. Weiss's most recent encounter with law enforcement occurred in 2020, after he'd broken into a man's house while under the influence of methamphetamine. The actor, then in his 40s, looked gaunt and disheveled, as he was still struggling with substance abuse. According to updates on his situation, the latter arrest prompted him to get help, and in early 2022, he celebrated 2 years of sobriety. Number 4. Devin Ratray. Actor Devin Ratray had started acting professionally at the age of 9 and worked on various movies before landing the role of Buzz McAllister, the older brother of Macaulay Culkin's character, Kevin, in the first 2 movies of the massively popular Home Alone series. He continued working steadily in the years that followed before he was arrested on domestic violence charges on December the 8th of 2021. Ratray, aged 44, was featured as one of the attractions at a convention in Oklahoma City. He'd reportedly gotten angry at his girlfriend, whose identity wasn't immediately released, for not charging 2 female fans for his autograph. Ratray had reportedly been drinking heavily, and when the couple returned to their room at the Hyatt Place, Oklahoma City, he reportedly attacked his girlfriend. He pushed her onto the bed, then placed one hand on her mouth and the other on her throat. He began choking her and allegedly said, "This is how you die." The woman bit his hand and broke free, at which point Ratray punched her in the face repeatedly. The police were called and the victim was found to have sustained bruising and marks under both eyes, scrapes above her lip and a chest bruise. Ratray, who denied ever attacking her, was taken into custody on charges of battery by strangulation, a felony, as well as misdemeanor domestic assault and battery. Number 3. Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes began acting professionally at the age of 7, making stage appearances in several musicals before she was cast by Nickelodeon on its sketch comedy series All That from 1996 to 2000. She went on to star in a spin-off series called The Amanda Show, before mainly focusing on a rather short-lived feature movie career. While still predominantly recognized as a former child actor, Bynes began struggling with substance abuse and drawing media attention through controversies and legal troubles. In 2012, a few years after she had stopped appearing in movies and on TV, she was charged with driving under the influence in West Hollywood. In 2013, she was charged with reckless endangerment and marijuana possession after being found smoking in the lobby of her Manhattan apartment building. The former charge stemmed from her allegedly throwing a bong out the window of her 36th floor apartment, but the case was ultimately dismissed. Her family's concerns for her well-being increased in 2013 after Bynes was arrested in Ventura County, California, for starting a small fire in a stranger's driveway. She was hospitalized for 72 hours under a mental evaluation hold, and her mother was subsequently granted a conservatorship of her affairs. In 2014, Bynes accused her father of abuse on Twitter. The latter maintained his innocence, and the former child star subsequently stated that her father hadn't directly abused her, offering a peculiar reasoning by saying, "The microchip in my brain made me say those things, but he's the one that ordered them to microchip me." Not long afterwards, she announced that she'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Bynes later apologized to her family for the tweets and in 2018 told the media that with the help of her parents, she was 4 years sober. Number 2. Orlando Brown. In spite of his attempts at cultivating a career in the music industry, Orlando Brown remained best known for his work as a child actor in the 1990s and 2000s. He appeared on The Jamie Foxx Show, Family Matters, and The Proud Family, as well as on Disney Channel's That's So Raven. In February of 2016, Brown was arrested after he'd hit his then-girlfriend in the parking lot of a police station. Officers took him into custody and found methamphetamine on him, which consequently led to Brown being charged with drug possession with intent to sell, in addition to domestic battery, for attacking his girlfriend. The former child actor, then in his late 20s, failed to appear in court, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Police eventually took him into custody in January of 2018 after responding to reports of a domestic disturbance at a residence in Barstow, California. The row involved Brown, his girlfriend, and the woman's mother. He was taken into custody on additional charges of drug possession and domestic battery and, once again, missed his court date. On April the 13th, bounty hunters apprehended him in Las Vegas, where they found him hiding in a homeowner's closet. Number 1. Danny Bonaduce. Danny Bonaduce became famous in the 1970s as a child actor co-starring in the hit TV sitcom The Partridge Family. After the show, Bonaduce went on to have a moderately successful career in film, radio, and television, while also taking part in celebrity boxing events and professional wrestling bouts. Known for his choleric personality, Bonaduce had several run-ins with law enforcement in the early 1990s. He was arrested while trying to buy cocaine in Daytona Beach, Florida, on March the 9th of 1990. In a dark, ironic twist, it emerged that Bonaduce was there hosting an event for drug abuse resistance education, or DARE, a program aimed at educating children on the dangers of drugs. A little over a year later, in March of 1991, he was arrested for assaulting and robbing Darius Barney, a transvestite escort. The incident took place in Phoenix, Arizona, and Barney reportedly suffered cuts and a broken nose. Bonaduce pleaded guilty to reduced charges, and his punishment included paying his victims' medical bills. In October of 2007, at the Fox Reality Awards, there was an altercation between Bonaduce and Survivor contestant Johnny Fairplay. They were both on stage, and Fairplay had reportedly jumped on the former child star to hug him. Bonaduce, a black belt in the Korean martial art of Tang Soo Do, subsequently claimed that he didn't like Fairplay's hands being so close to his throat. He adjusted his balance and threw the Survivor contestant over his head. Because he was holding a microphone at the time, Fairplay was unable to brace and landed face first. He staggered off the stage and was later reported to have lost some teeth, in addition to suffering a broken toe. Fairplay pressed charges and a felony battery investigation was opened, but ultimately dropped by the LA District Attorney's Office, which concluded that Bonaduce had acted in self-defense. Number 9. Patricia Ebel. Florida woman Patricia Ebel crashed a BMW into a vehicle that was stopped at an intersection in Naples in April of 2015. There were multiple aspects of the incident that caused footage of it to go viral in the aftermath. Perhaps most notably, a video captured at the scene showed that the suspect was wearing only a bikini while she was being put through a series of field sobriety tests by law enforcement officers. Social media users also reacted to the fact that the accident had occurred while Ebel's grandson was in the car with her. The woman's scantily clad appearance and her grandchild's presence in her vehicle were explained when it emerged that they'd been driving home after spending a day at the pool at the time of the collision. Upon failing the field tests, Ebel was taken into police custody and charged with 3 DUI-related offenses, which included driving with a blood alcohol content of 0.15 or greater while having a minor in the car. She was consequently given probation, which prohibited her from consuming alcohol for 1 year. The following January, it was reported that Ebel had been arrested for a second time after her probation officer had measured her blood alcohol level as 0.177, which is more than twice the legal driving limit. She was subsequently booked into the Collier County Jail and held without bond. Number 8. Brenda Fox. On January the 22nd of 2017, in the afternoon, a police officer was dispatched to the Commons Mall in Columbus, Indiana, in response to a call about an unsupervised toddler. Upon his arrival, the officer reportedly spoke to a woman who'd spotted a 2-year-old boy by himself on the mall's playground. The witness reported that the child had what appeared to be human excrement on his hands, which she and another bystander cleaned while awaiting the police. The Good Samaritan had also reportedly attempted to locate the boy's parent or guardian at the playground, but none could be found, at which point she contacted law enforcement. The toddler was subsequently taken to the Columbus police station, where he was looked after by caseworkers from the Department of Child Services. A short time later, 51-year-old Brenda Fox went to the station to inquire about her grandson, subsequently identified as the boy who'd been found at the mall. Fox claimed that she hadn't seen the police arrive at the playground, nor had she been approached about the boy by any bystanders. Officers at the station noted that Fox appeared to be under the influence of narcotics, and she was consequently arrested and booked into the Bartholomew County Jail on a charge of neglect of a dependent. Her grandson was later released to the custody of his parents. Number 7. Paul Riley. At around 9 p.m. on July the 23rd of 2019, deputies of the West Monroe Police Department in Louisiana responded to reports of a shooting in the 300 block of Ludwig Avenue. The victim, who wasn't named in subsequent reports, told the officers that he'd been shot by a man named Paul following an escalating argument. An eyewitness verified the victim's claims and also informed the police that the alleged shooter resided nearby. When deputies arrived at the respective address, they encountered 21-year-old Daquan Menefee. A police report indicated that officers found a gun in Menefee's possession that had been previously reported as stolen, an aspect that investigators learned after checking with the National Crime Information Center. Menefee claimed that his grandfather, who was identified as Paul Riley, had given him the firearm after he'd used it in the shooting to which the police had originally responded. Both Menefee and Riley were subsequently taken into custody, with the latter facing charges of possession of a stolen firearm, obstruction of justice, and attempted second-degree murder. Number 6. Edward Williams. In May of 2020, it was reported that police in Post Falls, Idaho, had received a call about a young child being allowed to drive a car on the roadway. When officers pulled over the vehicle in question, which had also reportedly been seen swerving onto the sidewalk and nearly hitting parked cars, they watched as the driver picked a young girl up off his lap and placed her on the seat next to him. When questioned by the police as to why he had allowed his 10-year-old granddaughter to operate a moving vehicle, the man, identified as Edward Williams, claimed that he was trying to be a good grandpa. It also emerged that Williams had an active warrant out for his arrest, which stemmed from an incident in Washington in which he'd allegedly escaped from community custody. He was thereupon arrested and charged with 2 counts of injury to children and fugitive from justice. Williams's grandchildren were reportedly picked up from the scene of the traffic stop by their mother. Number 5. Marie Pierre. Florida mother Julie Belliard left her 5 children in the care of their grandmother on September the 20th of 2019. When the grandmother, 55-year-old Marie Pierre, went to pick up Belliard later that day, she reportedly left the children aged 3 to 9 alone at her residence. While Pierre was gone, Belliard's 4-year-old daughter grabbed the kitchen knife and threw it at the television set. The blade reportedly bounced off the TV before hurtling towards the girl's 9-year-old brother and hitting the back of his head. One of the other siblings saw the boy bleeding and attempted to get in contact with either Belliard or Pierre, but neither of them answered the phone. The boy subsequently tried to call the police but accidentally dialed 991 instead of 911. He then ran outside and solicited the help of a neighbor, who promptly contacted the authorities. Officers arrived at the scene and the boy, who'd been accidentally stabbed, was airlifted to a hospital with what were described as non-life-threatening injuries. During the ensuing investigation, it emerged that the 5 children were unwashed, unkempt, and had several bug bites on their legs. The conditions in which they'd been living were described as deplorable. and they were consequently removed from the home by the Florida Department of Children and Families. Belliard and Pierre were both arrested and charged with child neglect. Number 4. Limom Cheeks. Tennessee woman Limom Cheeks was arrested in June of 2018 after a video of her releasing 2 children from pet kennels surfaced online. The 62-year-old reportedly confessed to Memphis police that she'd driven approximately 30 minutes from Whitehaven to Collierville with her 2 grandchildren locked in dog cages in the back of her vehicle. According to an arrest affidavit, the children claimed that there wasn't enough space for them in the back seat, so Cheeks told them to climb inside the cages for the remainder of the ride. The grandchildren would later tell officers that they'd felt uncomfortably hot in the kennels, as temperatures in the area had risen to 95 degrees Fahrenheit on that day. The video of Cheeks taking the children out of the cages, which was recorded by a concerned passerby, who subsequently contacted the police, went viral on social media in the incident's aftermath. The shocking nature of the footage resulted in the story being covered by several international news outlets. Cheeks was charged with 2 counts of child endangerment, but ultimately pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of violation of child restraint and was sentenced to a day in jail. Number 3. Claudia Patterson. On the night of June the 27th of 2021, police in Memphis, Tennessee, pulled over a truck that had been driving recklessly through traffic. Upon noticing the patrol car's lights flashing behind her, the driver, Claudia Patterson, allegedly mounted a curb before eventually coming to a complete stop and exiting her vehicle. The officers at the scene noted in the ensuing police report that the 51-year-old smelled strongly of alcohol, and they also found an open liquor bottle inside her truck. Furthermore, they reportedly came upon Patterson's 2-year-old grandson, who was unrestrained in his car seat. When asked for her driver's license, the woman was unable to provide it as it had previously been suspended and revoked due to several other DUI arrests. Patterson was reportedly listed as a habitual revoked offender in the police's database. She was consequently taken into custody once again and charged with multiple offenses, including child abuse and neglect, driving under the influence, and driving with a revoked license. Number 2. Billy Lovell Gibson. Following a disagreement with his aunt, a 7-year-old Louisiana boy retrieved a .22 lever-action shotgun from a locked gun safe at his Minden residence and shot her on August the 18th of 2017. When officers arrived at the scene, the child's grandfather, Billy Lovell Gibson, reportedly told them that the shooting was an accident, a version of events which the victim, who'd sustained non-fatal injuries, corroborated. The following week, however, Gibson was taken into custody by Webster Parish Police on suspicion of giving false information to investigators. The 79-year-old was consequently charged with felony contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile. The police determined that the shooting wasn't an accident, as Gibson had initially claimed. The boy had reloaded the gun 3 times, firing a total of 4 rounds in his aunt's direction, according to the findings of the investigation. Gibson's perceived responsibility for his grandson's actions stemmed from the fact that he'd made no effort to put the weapons in his home out the boy's reach. It was a concerning decision, particularly since the youngster had documented anger management issues and the reported habit of shooting things on the property, including the family's vehicles. Although the child's age precluded him from being held criminally responsible, he was referred to the state's social services in the wake of the incident. Number 1. Evelyn Miller. On February the 15th of 2020, police officers descended on a hotel in Bogalusa, Louisiana, where Evelyn Miller was hiding out with her granddaughter. The 66-year-old woman was taken into custody and booked into the Jefferson Parish Correctional Center in Gretna. The day prior to the arrest, authorities had issued a Level 2 child endangerment alert after Miller had kidnapped her 12-year-old granddaughter, Adriana, from Oshner Medical Center in Old Jefferson, where the girl had been receiving undisclosed medical treatment. It later emerged that Miller had taken exception to the doctor's decisions regarding her granddaughter's care, and she subsequently attempted to take Adriana away from the hospital. When she was confronted by nurses, Miller allegedly brandished a handgun and pushed at least one hospital employee to the ground in the course of making her escape. While driving away from the hospital, Miller also attempted to run over security guards who pursued her into the parking lot. Upon her arrest, the grandmother was charged with several felony offenses, including kidnapping and aggravated assault with a firearm. Adriana was reportedly found to have been unharmed during the course of the incident, while her mother was also arrested and charged with being an accessory to her daughter's kidnapping.
Number 8. John Mogan and Ashley Dubois. An Ohio couple were taken into police custody after uploading photos to their Facebook in which they posed with the money they'd just stolen from a bank. 28-year-old John Mogan and his girlfriend, Ashley Dubois, aged 24, carried out the robbery at the Savings Bank in Asheville on the morning of August the 24th of 2015. Dubois reportedly drove Mogan to the bank after using makeup to conceal his face and neck tattoos. He walked in wearing a black hoodie and handed one of the tellers a note demanding cash. Mogan then absconded on foot with the money in hand. A few days after the robbery had taken place, the couple posted a variety of photographs to their social media profiles in which they could be seen with bundles of cash in their hands and mouths. A non-profit organization called the Central Ohio Crime Stoppers reported the suspicious Facebook posts to local authorities, who'd been struggling to identify any suspects during their initial investigation. Upon looking into the couple's backgrounds, the authorities found that Mogan had previously faced jail time for an unrelated bank robbery and had only been released on probation a month prior to the Asheville incident. Both Mogan and Dubois were charged in connection to the crime, with the former facing an additional 3 years in prison. Number 7. Michael Harrell. A man unwittingly incriminated himself while committing a bank robbery by handing the teller a stick-up note with his personal information on it. The U.S. Bank in Cleveland, Ohio was robbed on July the 19th of 2019 by Michael Harrell, a 54-year-old man who was a regular customer at the branch. Harrell slid the note stating his nefarious intentions across the teller line. Upon reading it, the female bank employee realized that he'd accidentally written his demands on a slip of paper that also listed his name and home address. The robber had reused a note that he'd received from the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles earlier that same day. The teller gave Harrell the money he demanded and even addressed him by his name in the process of completing the transaction. The robber subsequently fled the scene, and the teller was able to use the personal information written on the back of the stick-up note to identify Harrell to the authorities. He was arrested soon afterwards and, in spite of the damning evidence, ultimately pled not guilty to the crime. Number 6. Siegfried K. A man responsible for an attempted heist in the city of Osnabrück was labeled Germany's dumbest bank robber by the tabloid newspaper Bild. The robber, identified only as Siegfried K., entered what he'd thought to be a bank in May of 2011. Siegfried would quickly discover that the building was occupied by a private physiotherapy practice and hadn't operated as a bank for 17 years. Siegfried grabbed a hostage while wielding a plastic toy gun and demanded $13,500 as ransom. Upon realizing he wasn't standing in a financial institution, he instead forced a bystander to withdraw approximately $500 from a nearby ATM and subsequently fled in a stolen car. Law enforcement officers were able to lift the man's fingerprints from the toy gun, which he'd left inside the vehicle after abandoning it. With his 22 previous criminal convictions taken into consideration, Siegfried was sentenced to 7 years behind bars for the robbery. Number 5. Daniel Rains. A 35-year-old man from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, proceeded to rob a bank after having already given the employees 2 types of identification documents. Daniel Rains walked into the Metro Bank branch on 2nd Street on January the 6th of 2019 and stated an intention of opening up an account. In the process of doing so, Rains handed the teller 2 separate forms of ID. As he filled out the various application forms necessary to open a bank account, he suddenly proclaimed that he'd made a mistake and that he was actually there to rob the bank. Rains pulled out a gun and demanded money from the tellers, but was only given a small amount of cash before fleeing the scene. During the course of his attempted getaway, Rains accidentally crashed his car into another vehicle. Later that day, he was arrested by state troopers on suspicion of drunk driving in connection to the vehicle collision. He was also charged for the bank robbery after law enforcement officials confirmed his identity with the bank employees who'd handled his ID. Number 4. Hannah Sabata. On November the 28th of 2012,
Hannah Sabata, aged 19, uploaded a video to YouTube in which she openly bragged about robbing a bank. The day before Sabata's video surfaced online, the Nebraska resident had gone to the Waco branch of Cornerstone Bank and made off with more than $6,000 while holding the employees at gunpoint. She fled the scene in a stolen car, which police would later find at Buckley Park in the city of Stromsburg. In the self-incriminating video she recorded after the robbery, Sabata recounted the crime she'd committed in great detail. The YouTube upload was titled Chick Bank Robber and featured Sabata's open admission to stealing a vehicle in York and conducting an armed robbery in Waco. The video, which also showed Sabata holding up thick stacks of cash, was set against the backdrop of music by the band Green Day. Sabata was arrested by police that same day and ultimately faced a prison sentence of 10 to 20 years. During her ensuing incarceration, she was found guilty of assaulting a guard and had 1 to 2 years added to her sentence. Number 3. Edna Flores. An armed bank robber who voluntarily gave the teller his state-issued ID was remanded into custody as he was in the midst of committing the crime. On January the 25th of 2021, Edna Flores, aged 34, walked into a PNC bank in the Humboldt Park section of Chicago with the intention of stealing $10,000. He wore a surgical mask, a dark-colored jacket, and a baseball cap beneath his hood as he approached the teller line and handed the bank employee a note. He had filled out a deposit slip for the amount of $10,000 and had reportedly written "No die packs" and "Armed" at the bottom of the ticket. The teller subsequently activated the bank's silent alarm and, in an attempt to stall the robber until the arrival of law enforcement, requested he fill out a withdrawal ticket. Flores was asked to show an ATM card and some form of identification, at which point he volunteered his temporary Illinois ID card. The ID not only featured his photograph but also listed his name and date of birth. Chicago police officers arrived at the bank about 12 minutes after Flores had entered the building. They positioned themselves behind the robber in line. He was arrested in front of the teller window and was subsequently charged with 1 count of bank robbery. Investigators discovered that Flores possessed an extensive criminal history, including more than a dozen past arrests and an array of criminal charges. Number 2. Luke Carroll and Anthony Prince. In March of 2005, after a pair of Australian friends had robbed a bank in Colorado, they immediately went to McDonald's to take pictures showing them with the stolen cash. 19-year-old Luke Carroll and Anthony Prince, aged 20, were in the United States on a working holiday and were staying at a luxury ski resort. They decided to rob the West Star Bank in Vail, a branch they frequented themselves. During the course of the robbery, they neglected to conceal their strong Australian accents and also forgot to take off the name tags that they were wearing as part of their work uniforms. They used emptied BB guns to make it appear as though they were armed. After bagging a total of $130,000, the two men used their ski passes to board a chairlift within minutes of the robbery. Carroll and Prince subsequently made their way to a McDonald's restaurant and posed for photographs with the money they'd stolen in hand. The pair were arrested a day later at Denver International Airport while attempting to purchase one-way tickets to Mexico. Both Carroll and Prince pleaded guilty to the crime, and they were imprisoned for 5 and 4 years respectively. Their failed robbery attempt was the subject of widespread mockery and ridicule, with media outlets dubbing the two friends Dumb and Dumber. Number 1. Orlando Henderson. A vault worker at a bank in Charlotte, North Carolina, incrementally stole $88,000 from his employer over the course of several months. He then incriminated himself by posting pictures with the stolen money on social media. In late April of 2019, Orlando Henderson, aged 29, was hired to oversee the cash vault at an undisclosed branch of Wells Fargo. Henderson reportedly took this new position as an opportunity to pocket cash from within the vault, to which he was working in close proximity. He then forged the bank's ledger to mitigate the discrepancies created by his theft. Federal prosecutors reported that the bank employee had made unauthorized withdrawals of small sums amounting to only a few $100s at a time during the infancy of his scam. As time progressed, Henderson started increasing the volume and frequency of his thefts, secretly withdrawing thousands of dollars on a daily basis. According to his FBI indictment, he'd set his own personal one-day high for money stolen on July the 15th of 2019 when he swiped more than $13,000 from the bank vault. Henderson didn't refrain from flaunting his newfound wealth to his followers on social media. In a series of photographs posted to his Facebook and Instagram profiles, Henderson could be seen posing with a brand new white Mercedes-Benz that he just recently purchased. He made the $20,000 down payment for the luxury vehicle using a portion of the cash he had stolen. Henderson also posted pictures of himself holding enormous stacks of bills. As the FBI had begun investigating the missing cash, the posts were used to identify Henderson as the culprit of the massive theft. Following his arrest, Henderson faced various charges in relation to his crimes, the maximum penalty of which was 30 years in prison and $1 million fine.
Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comment section below what the most embarrassing thing is that you ever did, unless you are too embarrassed, of course.